Most men think leadership starts when they get a title. They're dead wrong. Leadership starts the moment you stop waiting for permission and start taking control of your own mind.
We're going live, baby.
We'll do it live.
You're listening to the premier podcast for men who want to not only be better with women, but want to be better men in general. This is the Come On Man podcast. And here's your host,
Paul Bauer.
Paul Bauer.
Paul Bauer.
Paul Bauer.
Paul Bauer.
Paul Bauer.
Paul Bauer. He is a certified master life coach and NLP practitioner.
It's true. It's damn true. What's going on, guys? Happy Friday. I'm looking forward to the weekend. I don't know about you. Quick mic check before we get before we kick things off. I'm still working out the kinks with Restream. So drop a 1 in the chat if you can hear me okay. And while I'm waiting to hear from the chat, let me tell you my idea for this episode. For one, my views have tanked again. I'm not sure what's up with that. So I was watching a video the other day talking about how using your own transformative story will draw people in. And apparently the algorithm likes videos that start with how I did X, Y, and Z. And since it's Frame Friday and we talk about mindset, I figured I could talk about how I rewired my mind to have more of a leadership mindset, right? Well, now the thing is, when I was going through the show notes, I realized, like, man, I actually have had a more of a leadership mindset from a very early age. And I didn't really understand how to apply it effectively, though, at least not in relationships, until after I learned everything that I talk about in the podcast. So that's the journey I'm going to take you guys on today. It's story time with Paul Bebe. Okay. Some people don't know how to follow directions, but Phil says 69. I asked to drop a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. He dropped 69. At least it wasn't 6'7". Have you guys heard that nonsense with teenagers these days going 6'7"? I don't know. It's a dumb thing. Anyway, before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel, my name's Paul Bauer. I help men level up and get better with women. And the funny thing about doing that is it tends to make us better men in all areas of our lives. So let me take you way back in time, okay? Back to when I was a kid. My dad, who I admittedly kind of bag on a lot in the podcast. I bag on my dad, I bag on my mom a lot, and it's not really because I don't love them and I don't appreciate everything they've done for me. It's that sometimes you got to recognize where your ineffective paradigms came from. And so a lot of my ineffective relationship paradigms obviously came from my parents, but it wasn't like the stuff that they taught me was all bad, though. Okay. My mom, for one, showed, she really drove home how, her ambition. Right. And it was almost like reluctant ambition, though, because she originally just wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but my dad, lost, a job at one point and was out of work for like 2 years or something. And it forced my mom to go back to work and become the major breadwinner, which she often reminded my brother and I about for the rest of our lives. But if you look at her story and look where she came from, it's actually pretty inspiring. She grew up in absolute poverty. Her family lived basically in a shack. You know what I mean? My mom, she had her bedroom was basically a renovated chicken coop. Okay. They had an outhouse. They didn't have running water. They had to go out to a pump. I mean, they were living like 1800s style poverty where she grew up, and she managed to get out of that environment, go to college and become a nurse and actually make a pretty decent living. And she's able to retire and stuff like that. So her story is pretty inspiring. And then my dad, although he had a terrible temper, he definitely suffered from nice guy syndrome. There were some really good qualities. My dad would constantly tell my brother and I that nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. And, if you'd say, well, being able to fly, without an airplane is impossible. And he goes, yet, like, people just haven't figured it out yet, but they will. Like, nothing in this universe is impossible. So my dad would instill that very early on. He would also say, everything you want to know can be found in a book. Everything you want to know can be found in a book, which I mentioned in my first book, Everything I Wish I Knew When I Was 18, because a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about is in this book. It's also in my second book, Psychology Paradigm, which I don't have here because my son asked to read it. So I'm like, you're going to read my book? Okay, cool. So he took my book and now he's reading Psychology Paradigm. But yeah, my dad taught me this kind of stuff, right? Everything you want to know, can be found in a book, which I applied after my breakup with Red Pill Chick, because Red Pill Chick, one of the blessings of that relationship was she got me hooked on audiobooks. She was really big into self-help books, and she's the one that introduced me to the concept of listening on Audible, and specifically listening to self-help books. Before her, I never listened to a self-help book. Like, I would read novels and stuff periodically. I would listen to audiobooks, but they were still storybooks, like if I was going on a road trip or something like that. But I'd never listened to a self-help book until she introduced me to Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, and it changed my life, right? Which is funny, because if a lot of you guys who've been following me for a long time, you guys know that I hired a business coach last year, and I think this was kind of part of his shtick. But one of the things that he would tell me is, you writing books is not going to change men's lives. Like, you doing one-on-one coaching is the only way that you could change men's lives. And I was like, that's just not true. That's fundamentally just not true. You can take my books and, for a $15 a month Audible subscription, grab one of my books, which would be included in that, so it's free, and just listen to it on repeat, and you will fundamentally change your life. You don't need to hire me one-on-one, okay? I'm probably the worst salesman when it comes to selling one-on-one coaching, because I'll straight up tell you that. Like, you don't need to hire me and spend thousands of dollars on a 3-month program when you could just listen to the audiobook on repeat for the next 3 months, okay? So, like, I'm the worst salesman in history, but that's where I learned that. I learned that from my father. Okay. I learned that everything you want to know can be found in a book. And then I learned the concept of listening on repeat from Corey Wayne and from Bob Proctor. Okay. But that's where I learned that initially from my father, was when very young. Anything you want to know, you can be found in a book. Now, in my first book, I also add to that, anything else you want to know, you could find on YouTube or on a Google search or something like that. But if you really want to get in depth, a book is where it's at. Okay. Like an hour-long podcast, you're only going to get it's almost like a chapter in a book, right? But a book really encompasses everything. So this is one of the things I learned very early on. By the way, guys, before I get more into this, I've got a lot more here. Do be sure to, there we go, like, subscribe, hit those notifications, okay? I do have new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Fridays are all about mindset, okay? That I like to do Frame Friday episodes, because once you get your mind right, everything else falls into place, okay? Once you get your mind right, everything else falls into place. So another reason why I developed this kind of stuff early on was I had a mentor. I had a mentor in my karate sensei. His name was Fred Bodie. And I always call him Mr. Bodie. And Mr. Bodie, he really would beat it into us, and like literally beat it into us with kendo sticks and shit, right? But he taught us, he was always talking about, be a leader, not a follower. Be a leader, not a follower. And which was really important, a really important message, because where his dojo was downtown. So after school, my mom would pack my brother and I in the car and drive downtown. We lived up in the mountains, so it was like a 30-minute drive commute just to go down to karate school. But my mom really liked Mr. Bodie, because to her, he was very much like Mr. Miyagi. She wanted a sensei that was a lot like Mr. Miyagi and not like Sensei Kreese, right? So this was my mom shopping around for karate schools based on the Karate Kid, right? So my mom found Mr. Bodie because Mr. Bodie was very much a man who was about self-defense, not using it for sport and all this kind of stuff, which is funny because Mr. Bodie used to be a kickboxer. He used to do it for sport, and he was a champion kickboxer. And so his whole philosophy changed though as he got older, and was like, no, I really want to teach this as a self-defense art, not an aggressive, competitive art. So my mom had us go to his dojo, and he was always beating into us, be a leader, not a follower. And a lot of that was because where that dojo was in an area where there's a lot of crime. There was a lot of low income. There's a lot of gang activity, a lot of drug activity. And so getting kids off the street and teaching them to be leaders and not follow the pack and not get into drug dealing and to make something of yourself was a message he was really trying to teach. And so he would do that all the time. And one of the ways he would do this is at the beginning of every class, he would have us read leadership rules. And in my second book, Psychology Paradigm, I was able to capture that in a book for people to read because, it was something that was really important for me when I was growing up. And the leadership rules were, I always think positive. I never quit. I always keep trying, and I can do anything. Okay. Now imagine saying that every day, multiple times per week for years, right? Because I ended up getting a second-degree black belt. I did it for years. Just going to class multiple times per week, reading that out loud seeps into your subconscious mind. It develops a mindset of someone who doesn't quit. Okay. And I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna get into a little bit more, but Mr. Bodie, I'm going to get into it here in a little bit. The black belt rules after class. So we'd all, you would bow in, you would say the leadership rules, and then go work out for an hour. And then after, you would bow out, and then we would close the class with the black belt rules. The black belt rules were, I always strive to develop myself mentally, physically, and spiritually. I always show courtesy and respect to others, and I will only use karate for self-defense. So we would say that on repeat too. Well, Mr. Bodie really is the guy that taught me affirmations. And that was an affirmation. I didn't realize what it was happening, but one time my grades were really terrible in school. And actually, that happened a lot. My grades were terrible in school. And when our grades would come out, he would require us to bring our grades in, and so he could review them. And if your grades sucked, he wouldn't let you participate. And so I would go down there, and my grades were bad. And he goes, I want you to do this. He goes, just like the leadership rules and the black belt rules, I want you to write out, like, I'm a good student. I always study. I always pay attention in class, something to that effect. And he goes, I want you to print that, put that on a piece of paper and tape it up on the wall in your bedroom. And when you get up in the morning, I want you to read it 5 times. And when you go to bed at night, I want you to read it 5 times. Right. And he goes, just like the leadership rules. And he goes, I guarantee at the end of the month, when you're doing that, your grades are going to be better. And they were better, because when you say those types of things over and over again, that repetition seeps into your subconscious mind, and then you start acting on it without thinking. Okay. This is why I talk about paradigms a lot, but that's how paradigms work. It creates a habit in your mind that you act on without conscious thought. Okay. So Mr. Bodie is the first person that taught me that. And I didn't quite realize how effective that could be until later on in life. We'll get to that. Okay. But one of the things I'm going to talk about this here in a little bit about Mr. Bodie, but I didn't realize how truly blessed I was to have that kind of influence in my life at such an early age. Okay. Because after working in the space for 5 years now, I realized that nobody's taught this stuff. So many people aren't taught this stuff. They're taught that life is hard, everything's impossible, life sucks. Which is funny because my dad always had that kind of mentality, life sucks, then you die. And my dad had a very negative mindset, but somehow he was able to tell us that anything's possible, at the same time. It's very counterintuitive, but Mr. Bodie embodied that. That's one of the things I loved about Mr. Bodie is he embodied that can't quit attitude. And we'll talk about that in a second, in that positive mindset. Always have a positive mindset. Okay. But over the last 5 years, you see this kind of stuff. I mean, look at the guys who gravitate to the MGTOW space, the guys that hang out in incel communities, right? They have a fundamentally negative mindset about stuff. And I just wasn't wired that way. I was wired to have a positive mindset. I mean, just look at the leadership rules. I always think positive. I never quit. I always keep trying, and I can do anything, right? If you have been brought up that way, you're like, no, nothing's impossible. You know what I mean? But all these people just want to give up and quit. And I fundamentally just can't understand it. And it's because I wasn't raised that way. I wasn't raised to be a quitter. Okay. And that's why I don't respect guys in MGTOW and incel communities. And that's why I also like to stir the pot with those guys a lot, because there's a lot of guys in there that need to be shaken out of that mindset. They don't belong there. They just have gravitated there because it's easier to be in a negative mindset. We have a negativity bias in our mind. It feels good to feel bad. You want to stew in that shit, right? It doesn't serve you though. And so I like to kick the hornet's nest a little bit with those communities to shake it up and get the guys out of there that don't belong there. One guy at a time, So let me ask you guys a question. Okay. Did anyone ever teach you like how to lead yourself, or did you have to figure it out the hard way? Because a lot of guys in the red pill space that do come out better on the other side, they weren't raised this way, but they figured it out later in life. You know what I mean? So let me ask you that. Did you ever did anyone teach you how to do this kind of stuff at an early age, or did you have to figure it out the hard way? Just let me know in the chat. Okay. Now going off to the Navy, I realized that these lessons applied, far beyond the dojo. The last time I saw Mr. Bodie was right before leaving for the Navy. So he had retired from teaching karate by that time, and he went to go work for his wife. His wife ran a home healthcare business called Caring Hands. I don't know. I think they sold the business. I don't think it's there anymore in Denver, but in the Denver area, there used to be a home healthcare business called Caring Hands. It was ran by Chris Bodie, his wife. And Mr. Bodie retired. He sold his interest in the dojo and went to go manage her business, And so my brother and I knew that. My brother and I at the time, we were right before I was leaving for the Navy, we were working at a Dodge dealership for Emick Dodge in Denver. And so after work one night, we're like, hey, let's go down the street to Caring Hands, because the office was just down the street. We're like, let's see if Mr. Bodie's there. Let's go say hi, because I was getting ready to leave for the Navy. So my brother and I went over there. We went into the Caring Hands office. We knocked on the door and we're like, hey, is Mr. Bodie around? And they're like, yeah, who's asking? We're like, just a couple of his old students. And so he came out and he was like, what are you guys doing here? And we're like, oh, we just got off work and, we were doing X, Y, and Z. We thought we'd stop by. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah, I'm getting ready to leave for the Navy. And I just want to, say thank you for everything. And well, he goes, well, what have you guys eaten? You guys want to eat? He's like, hey, Chris. And he gets his wife out. He's like, hey, Chris, look who came to see us. He's like, let's take these guys out to dinner. Right. So he takes my brother and I out to dinner, and I get kind of, emotional thinking about Mr. Bodie. So Mr. Bodie, we were talking about his time in Vietnam, because he was an airborne ranger. And he was telling me, he's like, oh, so you're going off to boot camp, huh? And he was like, let me just tell you this. You need to tell yourself every day that you can handle it. He's like, it's a mind game. He's like, everything they do in boot camp is a mind game, and it's going to get hard. And he's like, just like karate, he's like, just like your black belt test, he's like, it's difficult, but you can do it. He's like, if you could do the black belt test, you can do this. Right. And so every day, like when it was really hard in boot camp, like we were getting cycled and all this kind of stuff, I would sit there and I wouldn't quit, and I just had Mr. Bodie in my mind the whole time, and that was, it was really important. Well, Mr. Bodie, like I said before, he was an airborne ranger. He was an airborne ranger in Vietnam. He had a Purple Heart because he survived a headshot. He got shot in the head. He didn't like talking about it very much. I wrote an essay when I was in 3rd grade about him. No, not 3rd grade, rather between 4th and 5th grade, I think. Or maybe it was between 5th and 6th grade. It was like a summer essay contest. I don't remember, but I had to write an essay about unsung heroes and stuff like that. I wrote this essay, and so I had to interview him, and he was talking about how he got the Purple Heart, and he was very, guarded about it. He didn't really want to tell it. My mom just kept digging. My mom is like a bloodhound, right? So my mom just is like, Mr. Bodie, come on, what happened? And he's like, I got shot in the head. He's like, I don't like talking about those, so I really don't want to talk about it. And we're like, you guys shot in the head and you survived, and you don't have like, you're not like, in a wheelchair, and you don't have like permanent brain damage and all this kind of stuff. Like, how did you do that? Right. That wasn't even the worst thing. Okay. And I don't really talk about the headshot in Psychology Paradigm, but I talk about this. He survived getting impaled on a sword. He was doing a sword demonstration in Japan, and they somehow they had it choreographed, but somehow they made a mistake, and he slipped, and he got fully impaled on a sword and was bleeding out. He got rushed to the hospital, and his can't quit attitude was all about I just need to stay awake. I can't let myself fall asleep, and go into shock because I'll die. I just need to stay awake. I can do it. I guess stay awake. And that attitude kept him alive for that kind of thing. Right. And so I had to capture that story in Psychology Paradigm, because that's the epitome of a dominant masculine presence. Like a guy who, gets stabbed and he survives it by his pure mindset. Right. That's the kind of guy that influenced me when I was younger. Right. But then going into boot camp and dealing with this kind of stuff and having this can't quit attitude, I also had one of my RDCs, my recruit division commanders, this guy, Petty Officer Logan. This guy was 6'5", 300 pounds, solid muscle, big, just big, big, solid dude. And he really taught me the concept of self-accountability. In this space, we often point the finger at women and go, oh, women have no sense of accountability, but most dudes have no sense of self-accountability. Okay. Petty Officer Logan taught me the idea of holding yourself accountable. Hold yourself accountable. Okay. And there was this time where I distinctly remember he was, we would do these training sessions in the barracks. We'd all sit on the floor, and he would sit on a chair and teach us something, some kind of Navy, whatever. And some kid did something wrong. And so he goes, you drop, get into a push-up position. And we had to take notes, right? We were supposed to be taking notes. And he goes, while you're in the push-up position, I want you taking notes, recruit, And this kid, I say kid because we were all teenagers, this kid's in the push-up position. And every time he went to go to pick up the pencil, he would fall over, he kept falling over. And Petty Officer Logan's like, what's your major malfunction, recruit? Why can't you do this? And he's like, it's impossible. It's impossible, Petty Officer. It's impossible. I can't balance myself, in the push-up position. I keep falling over. And so Petty Officer Logan got up, he goes over by the recruit, and he goes, get out of the way. He gets in a push-up position, spreads his feet out wider so he could do a one-arm push-up kind of thing, picks up the pencil, scribbles on the paper, throws the pencil down, gets up, and he goes, I will never ask any of you guys to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. Right? And that's where, that's the kind of mentality that I learned from guys like Petty Officer Logan. You know what I mean? Don't ask someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. That's having a leadership mindset, right? By the way, a lot of this kind of stuff, having a leadership mindset, setting the tone, leading your relationship, that's how you keep your relationship going in a long-term relationship so that it never falls apart, okay? Because that's what happens. Most guys, they get the girl, they rest on their laurels, they get complacent, and the relationship goes to hell in a handbasket. If you get this book, I show you how to never let that happen again.
You finally got her back.
the spark's alive again. Or you met someone new and everything feels effortless. Right now, anyway. But deep down, you know, most men lose it right after they win it. They stop setting the tone, start coasting, and attraction slowly dies in silence. That's what kills 90% of relationships: complacency. She doesn't stop loving you overnight. She just stops feeling you. And if you think loyalty alone keeps her interested, you're already slipping. Now that you've turned your relationship around with get her to fuck you again, or you moved on and found a real contender after forget that bitch, you need to know how to keep that attraction burning for the long haul. Introducing the next book in the Red Pill Guide series, Keep Your Bitch, coming this December. It's not about saving failing relationships. It's about never letting one fail again. You'll learn how to lead with frame, maintain polarity, and keep her obsessing over you year after year. Because attraction isn't permanent, it's maintained daily. Stay the man she fell for. Stay the man she can't stop thinking about. Keep Your Bitch. Available this December. Indeed, guys, it's available for pre-order on Kindle edition right now. Otherwise, the paperback, hardcover, and Kindle edition all drop on Black Friday on November 28th, okay? And then I'm working on the audiobook. I just finished recording up to chapter 3 yesterday. So today I'm going to try to knock one out if I can, if I have time. And then over the weekend, I'm going to try to knock out like at least 4 more chapters. It's a grind. It's a total grind to do the audiobook, guys, just so you know. And guys, this book's longer than the last 2. It's actually longer. And so each chapter recording is about 35, 40 minutes. You know what I mean? Just so you know, because keeping your woman is game on hard mode. Okay, it's game on hard mode. All right, who do we got in the chat here? We got Phil saying 69. Erkin's in the house. He says, good day, folks. Dar Fitness is here. Good morning. And let's see here. We've got Will Ringer. Hey, morning, gentlemen. John says, good morning, y'all. Omega says, howls, sup, wolves. Give me a 2 sweet, baby. Drop that 2 sweet in the chat. So John answered the question. He said, I had to figure it out on my own. I'm my parents' defense. My dad died when I was 12. Mom overwhelmed with 6 kids on her own. Yeah. You grew up in a Mormon family though, right? So you guys have like a whole baseball team worth of kids. Handsome Pete says, hey y'all, what's going on, man? All right. And then yes, pre-order the Kindle edition, guys. All right. So Mr. Bodie taught me, don't quit, be a leader, not a follower. My dad taught me that, anything's possible and anything you want to know, you can learn from a book. And then Petty Officer Logan taught me to hold yourself accountable. Okay. So that took me into the fleet. And so when I actually got to the fleet, one of the things that I realized very quickly, this started at boot camp. The first time I did this was at boot camp. I was, you have to do service week. You have to do this thing called service week, which service week for me lasted, I think, 3 weeks. But service week is you go work in the galley for a little while in boot camp. And I got assigned a role as a food runner. A food runner is a guy who keeps food on the food lines when people are coming to eat, right? So you have these pans full of food and they scoop that slop on your plate and stuff like that. Well, that food has to come from the kitchen. The kitchen is this massive open area with like tons of cooks and all this kind of stuff in the back, right? And so you have to bring the food out to serve to the recruits. And so you have to be fast. You have to be fast because the line goes fast, right? You run out of food quickly. And so you actually literally have to run. You're not supposed to run, but you have to. So you have to sort of, when petty officers are around, you have to sort of walk fast, but when they're not looking, you got to run, right? So that's how you do it. And that's how you do it well. And so I was doing it really well. And I was like the best food runner on my line. And so they promoted me to line captain. I became line captain. And then I realized, man, if I actually try to get to that next position, I don't have to do the grunt work. Right. And that's how the military works. And a lot of guys don't realize this, but the higher up you go, the less shitty grunt work you have to do. Okay. So I get out to the fleet. I carried that out to the fleet. And I remember I did this when I was doing general quarters. So when I first got there in general, I got assigned, a lot of people have to get assigned a fire control locker, right? Where you actually have to go fight fires because there's no fire department on the ship. Like you are the fire department, right? You're in the middle of the ocean. There's no one coming to save you. You have to learn how to do this kind of shit yourself. Well, luckily for me, because I was an operations specialist, they didn't put me in a firefighter locker. I was in damage control central where they manage all the fires. Okay. So I was a sound powered phone operator and my job was to listen and communicate what was happening from a particular fire locker to the damage control officer. Right. And so I would, I have to learn how to write these symbols down so I could communicate it effectively and hand it over to the guy who's like the head sound powered phone operator who was talking to the bridge. His job was to talk to the bridge and communicate stuff from the damage control officer up to the captain and all that kind of stuff. And then he had to keep a board going of everything that was happening on the ship, all the damage control operations on the ship. And I was like, I need to get to that spot. I need to get to that spot because that's the next spot. Right. And so I would work to get to that spot. And then once I got trained up to get to that spot, they moved me up to combat information center, which is where you sit there and you do radar, navigation, tactical planning, the stuff that I was trained to do. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is great. This is much better than being down in the stupid damage control locker. But I just knew that like this job sucked. I need to get to the next level. Right. Well, the same thing happened. When I was doing line handlers during underway replenishments. Line handling sucks. Like you're pulling lines over. It's hard work and it's heavy. It sucks. And so I was like, but the line captain just would bark orders and would just be like, move, like kind of stuff like that. But he didn't have to pull the line himself. I was like, I need that guy's spot. So I would try to get qualified in that spot so I didn't have to do that shit. Right. Well, I got qualified as the line captain and they moved me up to go do, I think lookout or something like lookout during underway replenishments, which is just a cake job. Your job is just sit outside and watch it. You know what I mean? Like it's this cake job. So that's how things tended to work. Well, I was, when I was at E3, I was like, I hate this watch rotation. We'd go and do this watch rotation where you do this thing you'd plot on this thing called a digital dead reckoning tracer. You'd sit at the SPA 25 radar console to help the guy plot on the DDRT, the digital dead reckoning tracer. You would sit at another radar console and your job was to track surface contact. So if there was a Group 3 tanker that was like 5 miles out, you would plot it and track it and stuff like that. And then you would go up to the bridge and sit what was called what was it called? Bright Bridge. I think it was called Bright Bridge, where you're manning the radar on the bridge. And so the officer of the deck would ask you like, hey, what's that contact doing? And you would look at it and track it and show them what was going on the radar. And I hated that. I hated that rotation. And the guy who was in charge of that was called Swiss, Surface Subsurface Warfare Supervisor. And I was like, I got to get that spot. I got to get that spot. And so this guy Beach, who's in the Wolfpack guys, he doesn't talk that much in there, but my guy Beach was one of the guys that trained me. This other guy, Meatball, we call him Meatball. Marchant was his name. Meatball trained me, and both those guys were excellent surface subsurface warfare supervisors. They were really good at showing me maneuvering boards and stuff like that. And so I got qualified as an E3. Well, one day Beach fucked around and messed something up and pissed off one of our senior chiefs, and Senior Chief Stevens fired him. He's like, you're fucking fired. And he goes to our LPO and he goes, who's qualified to sit Swiss? And they go looking through the qualification records and they go, Bauer's the only other one, senior. And he goes, get Bauer up here. He's in charge. And so as an E3, I got to sit a surface subsurface warfare supervisor position. And that's typically an E5 and above position. If you guys don't understand military ranks, E4 and above is a non-commissioned petty officer. And it's kind of a big deal. You're usually in charge of something. But when you're E3, E2, or E1, you're a grunt. You're a worker bee. Well, I got to sit in a position of authority as an E3 because I did the work to move up to that next level. And I ended up becoming a pretty goddamn good Swiss. And in fact, I was so good at it that when officers had to learn maneuvering boards for their SWO pins, their surface warfare officer pins, they would come and see me to learn how to do maneuvering boards because that was something they had to learn for that certification. And so they would all come see me because I was really fucking good at it. Well, all that kind of stuff really showed me that to be more ambitious, to always try to get to that next level, right? By the way, guys, if you're getting value out of any of this kind of stuff, where is this at? If you guys are getting any value out of this stuff, do consider sending super chats. Okay. That helps support the show probably more than anything else. I've been demonetized on Facebook for over a month now. It's not going to end until Christmas Eve. So your super chats actually probably support me probably more than anything else right now. I'd appreciate that. So after the Navy, I translated that mindset of you always got to get to the next level into my civilian life, so when I got into IT, I started out as a IT auditor. That was the position that they gave me. It was a made up position. A lot of it I talk about in the book, right? When it comes to your career, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And so my ex-wife was really good at networking, and she went to college with this chick whose husband was the help desk manager at a company called WebSense that no longer exists. And so she invited all these people that she knew from college over for a party. And this lady brought her husband, and she goes, "Oh, you work in IT. Can you give my husband a job?" Is what she said. And he goes, "Well, what does he do?" And she goes, "Well, he's going to school for IT." And he goes, "Oh, okay." And he invented a fucking job for me. He created this position called IT auditor and asked me to come in for an interview. They had me do an interview. And I found out later from my supervisor that he instructed her, like, this is just a formality. This is a formality. We're hiring this guy. So, so she had no choice but to hire me. So they hired me. And so he was the manager. She was the supervisor. They hired me. And my job was to go around like cleaning keyboards and mice. Do you remember the old trackball mice? How on the bottom of these things, there used to be a trackball. My job was to go around and pull those out and clean them with alcohol and stuff like that to make sure they're working properly and stuff. And I was like the ambassador, the goodwill ambassador for the IT department. That was my job. So I would go around, I would knock off all these floors. I would keep a track on a spreadsheet of everyone I talked to, and I would do that. But then when I got done with my list of people to do for the day, I would go and hang out at help desk and learn IT stuff, and so I would sit there and go, I want that spot. I want that spot. I want to get to that spot. And so like one Christmas I volunteered. There was guys that were going on vacation. And so I went to the boss and I said, "Hey, if you need anyone to sit help desk, I'm willing to sit in while these guys go on vacation." And they were like, "Oh, okay." So I would sit at help desk. I would take calls. That's where I really learned this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Just wanting to get to that next position. I took the initiative. I would go and do that kind of stuff. Okay. So that carried me up to be a senior director of an IT. I was a senior director of IT infrastructure for a company. And that mentality took me there. And what you'll find in IT, in a lot of jobs, but what you'll find in IT is that in order to move up, you have to move out. You have to, because when you get good at a certain thing, people want to keep you there. And so what you'll find is that moving up the ranks in a company is much harder to do when you're in IT. And oftentimes you got to apply for the next job. And you can give yourself a $10,000 a year raise. You can give yourself a $20,000 a year raise by just moving to another company. And one of the things that I learned is that, and I talk about all this shit and everything I wish I knew when I was 18. If you're not where you're at money-wise, this is some of the shit I talk about in here. One of the things I learned, I learned this from this other guy in IT, Ryan Ibarra. Love this guy. He ended up going to work for the sheriff's department, I think, doing IT for the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. I don't know if he's still doing that, but one of the things he told me was when you apply for a job and they ask you your salary requirements, they are legally not allowed to ask your previous employer what your salary was. So you can give them any number. And so what I learned from that is to always ask for, like whatever, like if I wanted a $10,000 a year raise or a $20,000 a year raise, to like ask for a number at that level, but give them a range, right? So whatever the bottom of the range is still $20,000 a year more than what I was making here. But then you say, yeah, I can't leave my job, my current position, unless I'm making between this and this. Like that's where I need to be. And what you'll find is they'll always offer you at the bottom of the range, but as long as the bottom of the range is where you want to be, like that's fine. That's one way of negotiating. There's other ways of negotiating salary, but I found that way super effective. Okay. So that's one of the things I learned. And that's how I was able to move up the ladder to be an IT director, like super fast. I got a job as the network manager for that company originally. Well, actually they hired me as a systems engineer. And then the guy who hired me was quitting a week later. So they just made me the manager. And so I was like, well, can I get a title change to network manager? And they're like, yeah. And a lot of that is strategic too. If you ask for title changes instead of raises, they're more likely to give that kind of stuff to you. And those title changes help you on your resume when you move out. Okay. You got to think strategically with this kind of stuff. So I had this kind of mentality just sort of learning along the way. And that's what carried me further in my IT career. And now I'm retired. I retired from IT this year. I'm doing this full time. I'm helping men. I'm an author. I'm a content creator. This is what I do full time. Speaking of helping men, I have a men's community. It's probably the most affordable community in the space for men. It's called the Wolf Pack. It's only $10 a month. We have a lot of guys in there just leveling up. One of the guys in the chat right now, Omega, I've been talking about him lately. He just posted that he's basically cured of type 2 diabetes. This is the second guy in the group that has cured himself of type 2 diabetes just by fixing his weight, going to the gym, eating better, all that kind of stuff. And he's done that with the accountability of the Wolf Pack. So let me ask you, when would now be a good time to run with the Wolves, brother?
Bear Club? Not anymore.
Wolf Pack, you fix what's broken. You lead like a man again. Too sweet, no pity, no therapy. Just fire, just flame. Cold bed, broken home. Midlife drift, feeling alone. You don't need hacks, blogs, lies. You need men with fire in their eyes. We rebuild from the ground up. No excuses, no soft stuff. Telegram lit, 24/7. Brothers locked in steel, not heaven. Step inside the pack. We don't fall, we attack. Truth, fire, presence, we bring it back. Masculine pride, no time to slack. Step inside the pack. Drop your past, claim your track. No therapy talk, no playing small. We sharpen blades, we take it all.
Oh, John, you drop that too sweet, baby. Too sweet. One of the things I don't like about StreamYard is when I go to show a comment, it takes like just a slight extra second to bring that shit up. I don't like that shit. Anyway, so now we're at a place where I've realized that career leadership and working and getting to that next level and being ambitious in my career, that sort of came naturally, but setting the tone and leading my relationships did not. It did not come naturally. And it wasn't until after my breakup with Red Pill Chick that, and then like maybe several months after breaking up with Red Pill Chick, I dated this chick, Cop Chick, right? I dated Cop Chick for like a couple of months. And what was a wake-up call with Cop Chick was that she straight up, very directly, because she was a cop, told me she needed a dominant man. She wanted a man that ran the relationship, a guy that, you know, set the tone and led the relationship and dominated the place, right? And the thing was, like, it did not, like, I was like, oh yeah, I could do that, but I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, because I'd never done that my entire life. Most of us haven't. Most of us haven't, right? And so after I broke up with her, I is really when I started doing the work. I really started doing the work. And it's right around near the end of that relationship, I started with the movie The Secret. The movie The Secret. That's why I'm really, you know, into this woo-woo shit, right? But the movie The Secret fundamentally, I think, helped me change my mindset with a lot of stuff. And it led me to where I am now. And part of that was leading me to No More Mr. Nice Guy, because I had this epiphany that I'm just not doing this right. I'm not, like, dating sucks. Keeping women around not working for me. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. With Cop Chick, I was really needy, you know, and I was like, I gotta unfuck myself. And I thought back to, you know, Red Pill Chick. She used to listen to audiobooks all the time. Like, maybe there's some audiobooks out here that I can listen to. And that led me to No More Mr. Nice Guy. I think that was the first one I read in this space. And but it wasn't until reading his second book, Dating Essentials for Men, that Dr. Glover really beat it into me that I needed to set the tone and lead in my relationships too. Right. Which I had, when I was writing Psychology Paradigm, and I was talking about Mr. Bodie a lot. I also talk about it in Everything I Wish I Knew when I was 18, but I realized that Mr. Bodie talking about being a leader, not a follower, also was supposed to be in my relationships too. He just didn't beat that into us enough. But being a leader, not a follower, carries over into every area of your life, your romantic relationships, your business relationships, your day-to-day. Okay. And so it wasn't until Dr. Glover beat it into me that I realized, shit, I needed to do that. I need to do that in romantic relationships too. And that's a big problem why I've been struggling with all these relationships, you know? And then it really clicked when I thought back to Cop Chick and then how I completely lacked any real leadership in relationships up to that point, you know? And also Atomic Attraction taught me about being dominant in the bedroom and stuff like that. And I was like, this is exactly what Cop Chick was asking for, you know? And a lot of women want this. They're just not as direct as Cop Chick was. You know what I mean? Like, so what I found was I would test this stuff out. I would treat all this stuff like a science experiment. I test this stuff out. And I found how women are very predictable with this stuff. And a vast majority of women respond very well to all this kind of stuff. Okay. There's women out there that'll argue and no, I don't want that. I don't want that. Like, okay, we're not talking about you, Cindy, but we're talking about all these other bitches out here, okay? But they all do. Cindy wants it too, guys, okay? But I had this epiphany that I was deferring authority to the women in my life, right? Happy wife, happy life paradigm. I would always ask I would ask Red Pill Chick what she wanted to do. I asked my ex-wife what she wanted to do. I couldn't make a decision without getting their buy-in first, right? Getting their approval. When you're doing that kind of stuff and you think that you're doing the right thing, that she's your partner, that you want to come to a consensus, what you're really doing is making her the decider. And women suck at making decisions. They don't even know what kind of shoes they want to wear today. They certainly don't know what they want to fucking eat for dinner. And it pisses guys off. We're like, just pick a place, bitch, right? But women don't do that because they're not wired for it. They're not wired to make decisions. They want men to make more decisions. And Corey Wayne taught me that. Corey Wayne's like, be more decisive. Atomic Attraction is the one that said, just pick a place, right? That's where I use the food analogy all the time. I got that from Atomic Attraction. Dr. Glover taught me the 3 T's, tease, touch, and tell. Tell women what to do, right? So I learned, like, this is all leadership in a relationship, and women respond very well to this stuff. Okay. There's things that women say they want. There's things that women think they want, but then there's things that they actually respond to. I teach you guys what women respond to. Okay. By the way, guys, follow me on social media. The links are in the description. I'm on all the good platforms except X because I'm suspended from X. I checked it yesterday and I'm still suspended. So it's not a week suspension. Might be permanent. I'm going to check again on December 7th to see if it's just a 30-day suspension. If I'm still suspended, then I'm going to create a new fucking account. Fuck those guys. What I think is happening is they handed the keys to the Jeep over to Grok. And so Grok's running the algorithm now. And I'm seeing like weird, I'm having other people tell me they're seeing weird shit, right? There's this guy who was posting about Bitcoin or, some cryptocurrency, and they flagged his content as sensitive. He's talking about cryptocurrency. Like that's not even sensitive. Grok is losing its mind. So anyway, I'm banned right now. So follow me on like Instagram or Facebook or something. Okay. So I learned that relationships thrive when a man sets the tone instead of reacting or deferring to authority. You've got to stop thinking of her as your partner. I know society says she's your partner and we want all this equality and all this kind of stuff. It just doesn't work that way in intersexual romantic relationships. It just doesn't. Women don't respond that way. Okay. I learned the concepts of polarity. You've got to create polarity in the relationship for the relationship to be to be healthy. Right. And to keep attraction alive. I learned polarity from Dr. Glover and Corey Wayne. They were both students of David Data. Okay. If you ever read, David Data wrote a phenomenal book called The Way of the Superior Man. Now, The Way of the Superior Man really gets into like a lot of the woo-woo of masculine, feminine energies and all this kind of shit. But it's good. It's good when you can, if you're not into woo-woo, if you can just take your mindset out of woo-woo for a little bit and understand the dynamics of being masculine and feminine and put it in a roles context, it really does work very well. So I like the woo-woo. So I like to talk about energy a lot. I know Rollo Tomasi fucking hates the concept of energy because he doesn't like the woo-woo, but I love that woo-woo shit, man. Embrace the woo-woo, because guess what? Women love the woo-woo shit too. Okay, they love that shit too. But when a man fully embraces his masculine role, which is to set the tone and lead a relationship, women naturally want to relax into their feminine. They naturally do. They're like, oh man, it's so. Any of the guys in the wolf pack right now that have fundamentally learn this stuff. Like I have a lot of leaders, like guys I consider leaders in the wolf pack. And these are guys that are setting the tone and leading their relationships. They've mastered this shit. They've read these books on repeat. They know what the fuck they're talking about. John here, I would consider him one of the leaders in the wolf pack. He's definitely a guy that drops really good value in the pack a lot. What they will all say, they all say the same thing, is that when you're in a relationship with a woman and you're the one that's setting the tone, you're the one that's making the plans, you're the one that's, taking care of shit. You're the one that, she doesn't have to worry about anything. What you'll find is these women are just like, oh my God, like I don't have to make a decision. Oh my God, I love that I don't have to think about anything. Because women just want to show up looking hot at the end of the day. And so if you could be that, you could provide that structure of the relationship. They fucking love you. Okay. They fucking love you. And this is largely what I'm talking about in Keep Your Bitch. Okay. It's largely what I'm talking about. Okay. But it comes down to frame and having a dominant masculine presence. Okay. And frame is up here. It's all up here. Okay. It's how you do that kind of stuff. I also teach this kind of stuff in my course, the Passive Dread Blueprint. The Passive Dread Blueprint, it's really designed for guys who, their marriages are in the garbage. They're heading for divorce. They're thinking about doing marriage counseling. Well, marriage counseling doesn't fucking work. Okay. You can't talk your way back into her good graces. You can't talk your way back into her panties. Okay. If she's not fucking you right now, a therapist isn't going to help you. You need Passive Dread. Passive Dread teaches you a different way that's 20 times more effective. And a lot of it is developing this dominant masculine presence that she's got to earn your love. Okay. She's got to see you as above her in some way because of her hypergamous nature. The Passive Dread Blueprint really nails this down. Okay. I talk about the Passive Dread Blueprint in Keep Your Bitch because it will also keep your relationship going when you learn how to apply Passive Dread. You have to make Passive Dread a part of who you are. That's why it's passive, because you make it a part of who you are. It's just how you act naturally. It makes you more of an attractive man. It'll turn your fucking relationships around. Okay. So if you guys haven't taken the course yet, what are you waiting for? I'll drop a link to that in the chat here. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. So the way you do all this kind of stuff, the way you rewire this mindset, right? You can take courses and stuff like that. But I learned most of this stuff by listening to audiobooks on repeat. That's how I learned most of this stuff. And one of the things that I learned that concept from Corey Wayne. He said to read his book 10 to 15 times. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. But there were certain things in Corey Wayne's book that didn't work for me. They might work better for other people, but they didn't work for me quite well. But Dr. Glover's stuff, like there were certain things in his books that I found worked better. And then Atomic Attraction, there was certain stuff in his book that I thought worked better. So I just listened to all three of these on repeat. And I learned from a guy named Bob Proctor, who read the book Think and Grow Rich every day for like 60 plus years before he passed away. He ended up becoming a multimillionaire. He became a millionaire after reading that book on repeat. And then also he started so he was reading that book on repeat, and then he started a floor cleaning company that expanded into 3 countries. He was cleaning floors in New York, in Toronto, and he had an outfit out in England too. And what he would do was make his employees listen to The Strangest Secret by what's his name? Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale wrote a really small book. It's basically a very condensed version of Think and Grow Rich. And he wrote that and then also turned it into a record, because this was how old it is, right? But he would make these guys listen to the record every night while working on repeat. And next thing you knew, he had millions of dollars, and he was at a casino blowing it. And he didn't even care, because he's like, this money is just going to keep coming in. Like money's nothing, right? Money's nothing. And he had this like idea, like, how did I get here? He's like, just a couple of years ago, he goes, I owed $8,000 and I only made $6,000 a year. And now I have millions of dollars. How the fuck did this happen? And it clicked in his head that he had been listening to this shit on repeat. He had fundamentally changed his own paradigm when it came to money by listening to the shit on repeat. So he sold his business. He went to go work for Nightingale Conant, which was Earl Nightingale's company, and they were making audio productions on this kind of shit, right? And so he went there to study under Earl Nightingale to learn how the fuck did this happen? Like, how did I rewire this stuff? It works for anything you want to master. It works for anything you want to master, okay? Just like my dad said, anything you want to know, you can learn from a book. And the beautiful thing about this day and age that we live in is we have audiobooks on Audible that are just a click away. A click away. You have the world's vast amounts of information right here. And it's effortless learning. You just put in some earbuds, when you're at the gym, you get in a car and you're driving to work, you can listen to this shit and fundamentally rewire your mindset. Okay. So, and then in the stuff that you really want to learn, let's say there's a particular book that you want to master, you listen to that shit 10 to 15 times. The reason why 10 to 15 is because we only retain about 10% of what we read or listen to. So you can listen to one of my books, right? Listen to my book and go, yeah, okay. Now I understand where Paul's coming from, but you've only retained 10% of what I told you. Okay. But if you listen to it again, there's new things are going to click for you. And as you're testing this stuff out, you're going to see it in real time and go, boom, that's what Paul was fucking talking about. That's what Paul was talking about. Okay. So then you listen to it again and more stuff starts appearing to you. It's like, fuck. You have all these epiphanies. And then you start acting on this shit without even trying. Okay. That's the magic of it. So that's one way of rewiring. And that's how I rewired myself for relationships. Because after all these failed relationships with red pill chick, cop chick and all this kind, my ex-wife, all this kind of stuff, I was like, I'm fucking up here and I don't like this. I don't like this. I never want to be this way again. Never. And that's the goal. That was the goal of Keep Your Bitch. I was like, I never want to be in this position again. I want to learn this stuff so I never fucking end up this way again. And so I ended up with Keep Your Bitch. Brother Kamal in the Wolfpack, he goes, dude, you've been talking about this forever. Like, you manifested this shit. I'm like, yeah, like this was the ultimate end goal, is to get to a place where I could be here, right? And teach this. Okay. I also, learning, like watching the movie The Secret, and then also reading other books that inspired The Secret, like Think and Grow Rich, The Science of Getting Rich. I still love listening to that stuff. I'm listening to a book right now by Robert Collier, called, God, was it The Secret of the Ages or something like that? And like, I love those types of books, but a lot of them come back to affirmations, right? Learning affirmations, which is what Mr. Bodie taught me when I was a young kid. Mr. Bodie taught me that, right? So I still practice that. I practice affirmations. In fact, right now I have a card right here that has my affirmations taped to my monitor. I have one in my pocket, my goal card. I learned that from Bob Proctor. But I also do journaling every morning. So I get up in the morning and I make a cup of coffee and I grab my vitamins and, and I sit down. And after I take my vitamins, I just sit there and journal for about 10, 15 minutes. And I write out my future in the present tense. That's how I do it. So a lot of that really is about mindset and stuff, right? And then I also, I've created mind movies for myself. Mind movies are something that Joe Dispenza teaches, but it's basically the same thing. It's like a visual affirmation. It's kind of like a movie version of a goal board, and you have these images that pop up on the screen, like maybe, stacks of money and like, hot women, like whatever it is that you're trying to get. And then there's affirmations that play there. And then periodically you watch like a kaleidoscope, and the kaleidoscope puts you in a trance so that when you see these images, it goes right into your subconscious, right? So mind movies are pretty cool that way. I listen to sleep affirmations, which is basically sleep hypnosis, And so I have these sleep earbuds that I just listen at night, because when you're sleeping, your conscious mind shuts down, but your subconscious never shuts down. So your subconscious is listening to stuff all night, just grinding away at this shit. And that's creating paradigms. Okay. So that's another way that I did that. And then I started studying NLP. So I am a master NLP practitioner. I did get certified by the Priority Academy out of England. And the thing is that after studying NLP and all the different techniques that I learned in NLP, I realized that fucking law of attraction is just NLP disguised as mysticism. A lot of the stuff they teach in law of attraction type books and courses and stuff like that is really just secretly NLP. And all you're doing is rewiring your subconscious mind. That's all you're doing. Right. So that's how I rewired my mind to set the tone and lead in relationships, and how to have more of a leader mindset. Okay. So in closing, I want to leave you guys with this: leadership and setting the tone in all areas of your life, not just with women. It's a lifelong process. Okay. The work never stops. You don't arrive. You keep mastering yourself all the time, constantly. And that's one of the things I talk about in Keep Your Bitch. You never can rest on your laurels. You always have to keep working on yourself. You're not working on her. You're not really like investing in the relationship. You're working on yourself constantly, because working on yourself constantly keeps your woman guessing. She keeps rediscovering new things about you. It keeps her invested. That's what Keep Your Bitch is all about. And that's largely what a lot of Passive Dread's about. All right, guys. That's all I got for this episode. Tune into the podcast on Monday. Monday's episode is pre-recorded. My good friend, the Morgan May, returns. Morgan has been on the podcast more than any other guest. It's funny because it's a Red Pill show. We talk about men's stuff here, but Morgan, she and I go way back. We go way back to my beginning days of TikToks. We become like content creator pals, right? Well, she every time she comes on, she creates a lot of controversy. It's hilarious. But what I like about Morgan, other than some other women in the space, right? There's a lot of women like Sadia Khan, right? That are total grifters, because what they'll do is they take a lot of concepts that we teach in Red Pill and they say it, but a lot of guys don't want to hear this stuff coming from a man. They want to hear it coming from a woman. And then these guys start simping for these women. And they're like, oh, if I just, send her $500 super chats and stuff like that, she's going to love me and all this kind of shit. Right. So these women are able to attract large audiences telling men shit that they have no fucking clue what they're talking about, but they're hot. Right. Well, Morgan's hot, but she doesn't coach men. She coaches women. And so that's one thing I like about her. She's not trying to grift off of men. She's coaching women. And she's one of the things she's got going on is she's teaching women to deprogram their inner nice girl and bring out their villain energy. And I was like, I've got to fucking talk to Morgan about this shit. I talked to her about this. So it's really going to trigger some guys, but okay, I challenge you guys, don't get all up in your feels, okay? Have some mental frame. Pay close attention to the conversation, because what you'll realize is that everything I teach you is exactly the traits Morgan teaches women to look out for in a man. Everything that Morgan talks about and what she teaches women to look for in a man, I'm teaching you. Okay. So watch it from that point of view and you'll get much more out of that conversation. Okay. And side note, since I moved to Restream, the tier I'm on with Restream won't let me schedule pre-recorded lives. So you'll find Monday's episode in the videos tab of my YouTube channel, and it's scheduled as a premiere. So it's going to be the same. It's going to be a very similar experience. It's pre-recorded anyway. But we'll be able to communicate in the chat. So tune in on Monday morning. I'll be in the chat and we can, eat some popcorn and watch Morgan fucking drop some gems. I was dropping some of the clips from that in the Wolfpack, just showing guys like she's going to trigger some fucking people with some of the shit she says. In fact, I got I've got a soundbite that I was like, this has to be one of my sound bites now. Here, listen to this. This is hilarious.
You're weak as shit and call yourself an alpha. Like, get fucked.
I was like, take it out of context is gonna piss off a lot of women. So, or a lot of women, a lot of dudes. We do have a super chat here. Brother Omega with a $4.99 super chat. He says, get your ass in the pack and watch your life flourish. You can do anything you set your mind to and have others to help you push forward. Absolutely. And because of that, I'm going to give him this one.
I was just going to say it. This guy fucks. Am I right?
Yes, definitely. This guy definitely fucks, guys. Get in the Wolfpack. I talk about him a lot. This guy has fundamentally changed his life. It's beautiful to watch this guy. He's very inspiring. All right, guys, that's all I got for this episode. If you haven't done so already, hold on, here it is. If you guys haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, hit those notifications. I do have new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We'll see you guys in the chat on Monday.
This has been the Come On Man podcast. Now, go out and get it.